I used a couple of words in the course of leading that meditation. I'd like to reflect a little more on. You may not have known what I was talking about when I said intelligent causation. In a certain way, I don't know what I'm talking about either. But I'm pointing to something, trying to describe something that's quite immediate in experience, but not always noticed. And it's very core to the teaching. It's related to the recognition of how things happen on their own, how the body and mind are happening, this kind of stream of events, which we call the body mind. They're sort of two things and they're not. They're not two things. We don't really have a good word for that kind of thing. Conceptually, they seem to be different, but they're so interrelated and kind of arising interdependently. And so there's this sort of stream. And as we meditate, we notice, the breath, the stream of events which constitute breathing. It's not, the word breath just kind of names it like it's just this one thing. Okay, it's breathing. But in the direct experience, it's not just one thing. It's a whole flow of things. From the beginning of the in-breath to the end of the in-breath, to the beginning of the out-breath, to the end of the in-breath, and every kind of pause between. You're right in this sort of flow of experience. And with that sort of presence that's arising and noticing all of that, there are these moments of interruption where, kind of mindfulness disappears. Next thing we're become mindful of, we've been thinking, we've been going down this other flow we call mind. It's one aspect of mind, the thinking aspect of it. And we've been kind of going downstream that, and we wake up to thinking, and go back to the body. But in all of this, one could say there's just conditioned experience arising. And I've really found it helpful to notice thinking. I've mentioned that when I lead meditation. Different people sometimes are drawn to different aspects of their experience. I've been drawn to the way that thoughts arise of themselves, and more deeply, how even mindfulness arises of itself. These sorts of schemes of occurrence, of states and perceptions that make up what we are. And this other thing that arises in the midst of that, which is a sense of I'm doing it, my thought. So this thought arises completely of itself, despite your intention to be on the breath. And the mind says, oh, I was thinking. It creates this doer. It creates this sense of someone in charge or who ought to be in charge, who's screwing up because they're not enough in charge, called I. It's a source of unending fascination for me. So when I try to talk about the stream of intelligent causation, I'm trying to describe kind of what's happening without that, without inserting this character there who seems to be doing everything. Sometimes when I say it's all about conditioning, people think that they're like machines. Oh, do you mean I'm just a machine and it's just, operating automatically, no one in charge? And I don't mean that either. That doesn't seem to be accurate either. That's why I use the word intelligent causation. It's not, there's the mind is doing its thing, which is to perceive and find intelligent patterns and notice their relationships and construct a world, construct a self. All this stuff's going on. And it's all the work of conscious intelligence. And what's astonishing is that all that works quite well without this I character. And that's a shocker, if it can ever be. Just glance for an instant that this is all working quite well. It's not machine-like. It's full of intelligence. It's full of mind doing what mind does. And it's full of feeling. And by that, I don't just mean sensation. There's that sort of mental feeling, which is emotion. Well, it's both mental and physical. There's no emotion that doesn't include the body in some way. There's actually hardly even a thought. If you become really, really sensitive, you actually can feel a thought trying to happen. If you're really, really calm and there's not much thinking happening, you can feel the thought trying to arise. And then it does, usually in a moment of mindlessness. Something kind of drops its attention and thought arises. But it's curious that even thoughts, even thinking, comes up with some sensation, some feeling. Kind of astonishing. So you can notice that flow, and it's kind of the nature of vipassana as a practice is to direct your attention to this flow of things happening. But there's another kind of way of practice, which is less done in vipassana, that's, I think, equally helpful, which is to notice the formless space in which all this is happening. All this body and mind are events in a here and now opening of knowing. Kind of field of awareness as a place in which the stream is happening. And so this is like our fundamental openness, our fundamental awakeness, which isn't just the stream of mind of events happening, and it isn't just the stream of the body happening. There's this greater awake within it all, within which it all is arising and passing. We don't have a good word for that. The greater awake. But in terms of our course here on balance, on finding balance, that fundamental openness is so helpful to notice, to identify, and to begin to wake up to that fundamental openness that we are, which is not conceptual thinking. It's not any worded thing at all. It's a deep silence of presence, which is here every moment, all the time. You don't have to make it happen, but you might not notice it. It might go completely unnoticed, this deep silence of presence. So, when we're talking about balance and equanimity, we've been talking about how, it's preferences that often throw us off. Preferences and expectations create great turbulence in us when they're not met, when our preferences are not met, when our expectations are not met. There's a sort of sense of demand inside of us that they be met. And a lot of resistance comes up inside of us, creates a lot of suffering. And yet we can't, it's you hear that and then you think somehow practice is like to prevent yourself from having preferences, to try to find the space of mind in which you have no preference and kind of abide in that. Okay, and I'm not having any preferences right now. Doesn't work very well. Preferences arise. We have preferences. We are conditioned with preferences. And not everybody's is the same, in case you notice. It's why two human beings making a life together is so difficult. Not to mention bringing in all these other little human beings that also have their preferences and express them with great relish. So, and then there are the parental preferences and the aunts and uncles and friends and all of this. It's just happening. It's just happening. But it makes such a difference how you relate to that. A preference arises in you. Oh, I didn't want it to be raining today. I'll choose one that seems pretty innocuous. Oh, I didn't want it to be raining today. I want it to be sunny today. What if you just notice preference has arisen? Preference has arisen. Here's a preference. This is it. This is Mark Hart being human. Here's a preference arising in this openness, which is completely free to notice and to be without whatever's here. Okay, no problem. Here's a preference. But somehow when you do that with a preference, the preference isn't entrancing. You don't like go into a trance around it. Like I have this preference and I'm entitled to it and the whole universe should cater to it. That's kind of the trance we go into, right? Around preferences and expectations. Our expectation isn't met and we're angry. I had this contract with the universe that this was going to happen. I thought you said you would. I thought you said you were going to do this. And they didn't, or it didn't happen. And we're angry about it. And then there's the possibility of just noticing, oh, anger has come up. I had a preference, anger came up. No judgment. Oh, I'm judging. I'm not being a good Buddhist. Oh, there's a judgment. Judgment arose. Look at that. Judgment arose. I'm not being a good Buddhist. Oh, a bad feeling arose with that too. The sense I've been doing this for 25 years and I'm a failure. I'm really a failure as being a Buddhist because I can't make myself not have preferences. Oh no. I can't live in this kind of all the time. So I've completely failed as a Buddhist. All right, judgment has arisen. Aversion, self-aversion has arisen. And it's all just happening. It's all just conditioning. Often the condition is ignorance. The most powerful condition that's operating in all this is ignorance. The ignorance that doesn't see this preference, this expectation. It's just an energy arising in this here and now space of awareness. It's just a flow of something. And we don't see that. We're ignorant of that. And we say, it's happening to me. It's constituting me. It's a threat to me. All these other things kind of pile in. And with them, just tons of suffering. Tons of suffering. So to identify this fundamental openness that we are, which you don't have to create, openness is not a state that we have to get ourselves into. That's like looking at it the wrong way, I think. It's what we are already, and we go into trance that we're something less than that. And that's the fundamental vulnerability we've had since we were little tykes. Came into this world, we're given a name. We didn't have a name. What we are has no name. And we're given this name. We start to be told about ourselves. And we start to be told, oh, this is good. You do that. That's good. That's bad. You do that. That's bad. We start to have all this sort of conditioning around what was just openness coming into this world. Though I must say, openness with a certain kind of personality, certain kind of proclivity, a certain kind of tendency to prefer things, and so forth. So it's not, just openness that comes into the world. There's a whole lot of conditioning that also comes into the world. And that's where the notion of karma comes from. It's just the recognition that We don't actually show up as a blank slate. And everybody knows that. I've been a parent and has realized they've had more than one child. And like when a child arises and they seem to be this kind of being, and another child arises and they seem to be that kind of being. And you don't think it's just because you've changed the way you parent or you're projecting something different on each one. They actually kind of come with a code, you know, whether it's a genetic code or karmic code or however you want to conceive of that, they kind of arrive with these personalities, which are our preferences. And yet, we go through the life and you can't live a life without following your preferences to some degree. I'm not indifferent as to what I do for a living. I'm not going to kid myself. Would be as good at anything. I'm not very mechanical. I'd be a lousy car mechanic. I probably could learn it if I had to, but I'd have very little interest, very little natural interest. And I don't know that whatever this I being is, chose that. It's kind of what came, what was born with Mark Hart. What was born with Mark Hart. It included these traits, it included these talents, it included these weaknesses and lack of talents. And it, looked a certain way. Its body has some inherent strengths and weaknesses. Those weaknesses may eventually kill me. All this stuff is kind of going on. But when you discover this openness that you are, right in that openness is a kind of a tenderness. And we often call this openness the heart when we're using the word not in kind of a romantic sense or a sentimental sense. We talk about this kind of space in which things arise and the tenderness we have towards them when we really see clearly what's going on. And in my experience, that takes a little while to mature and develop. One might first just notice the openness, just to notice the quality of mind to be aware of things that arise inside of it. And there's a kind of neutrality there, a pleasant neutrality, I might say, if that's not an oxymoron. A kind of pleasant neutrality about just seeing what is, just seeing what's arising. And there's a calm to it. There's an ease to it. There's a no problem to it. And somehow, as that matures, I also see a tenderness to it. You start to be able to see what it is to be a human being through this stream, which you were born with and you were given the name for. Okay, the name for this stream is Mark Hart. Somebody else decided that. I didn't decide it. I could take my own name. I know some people do that, but I didn't. I took the one that was given. It was named for a World War II general, Mark Clark, who most people have never heard of. I actually know nothing about the man. And I didn't even know why my father admired him. Maybe I should find that out someday. But in any case, that's part of this way that the stream is born into something. It's born into an environment. It's born into all these people that have expectations. They have their own kind of emotional needs. They have their own wounds. You kind of wake up in the middle of that, trying to figure out who you are, what you are. They're telling you what you are. They're telling you how you should be. They're telling you what's good, what's bad. All this poor being, kind of like trying to take it in, and we get all this sort of conditioning. But if you chance to hear the Dharma, if you get this far, and all of you have gotten this far, and it's pretty much an incredibly fortunate thing that you even hear this teaching, because most people don't. Maybe that'll change in the future, but most people don't. To just be pointed out that what you are isn't all this conditioning. It's not actually. It is and it isn't. I don't know how to talk about this actually when it comes right down to it. Because we are all this conditioning and we're not all this conditioning. We're the space in which it all arises. And we're that stream too. But something fundamentally shifts when you know yourself to be that openness. And when that openness even matures into tenderness, and you start to love that stream which you are, all of it. You know, even that anger that arises over and over again at this particular thing that happens to you in your life. I don't know why my computer and my phone make me madder than anything. And it's completely ridiculous because obviously they're not intending to do the things that they do or to be confusing in the way that they are. But they are. They're confusing. And they do funny things that I can't account for that interrupt what I expected to be doing. And there's just this frustration that arises. You know, to be Mark Hart is to have frustration arise in your stream of mind. I just have it, you know. There's this kind of wanting things to go a certain way, and there it is. They don't, and I get frustrated. But I said that wrong because I doesn't really do anything in this whole scheme. It's just tacked on there. It's just tacked on there. There's the stream, and in the stream of intelligent causation, once you start to hear the Dharma becomes a factor in this stream of intelligent causation. And you may start to have what's really going on be named. You start to see it, and it's like, oh, wow, just like frustration arose. Frustration arose. And in the strange tenderness of openness, that's completely lovable. It's completely lovable. One can feel sympathy for it because it's suffering, you know, and it's not so different than being with young children who we don't project a whole lot of ability to be different on, you know. We don't do that so much. The older we get, the more we demand control. And, you know, that's probably necessary. And I'm not saying we can do it otherwise. Maybe we could do it better, but it's part of the conditioning that demands control as we grow older. But just imagine the possibility of your heart really opening to what is happening moment to moment. And suddenly there's no like future self you've got to make yourself become. That to be lovable is just like right there. It's just like right there. What is lovable. Even suffering. It doesn't mean you want to perpetuate suffering. It doesn't mean that the stream of intelligent causation wants to liberate itself from suffering. It does. Deeply. It's its deepest urge, I think. It wants liberation. And this is what is seldom really understood, is it happens on its own. It's happening on its own. In Buddhism, sometimes the image is given of a tree that's ripening its fruit. We are all trees that are ripening their fruit. And the fruit tastes different in every tree. That's what makes this kind of fun, this human thing, is all the flavors of the different people, all of the things that, you know, put them together. And in each is a stream. It's like a tree that keeps growing. It keeps putting out more wood. Then eventually it has enough wood that it blossoms and is able to set fruit. And then it keeps working to set that fruit. And the fruit sweetens and it ripens. At a certain point, it's ripe. And in Buddhism, it says when the fruit is ripe, it falls from the tree. This may be a jungle metaphor because I think we in New England would put up a ladder and pick the fruit. But you know, when I was in Thailand, it seemed like some of these trees are just huge. I mean, there's so many of these jungle trees. I don't know that they actually climb them. So maybe the metaphor fits it culturally, that when the fruit is ripened, it falls and then you gather it off the ground. I don't know. But that's at least the way it is. When the fruit is ripe, it falls from the tree. We are a stream of intelligent causation, and its end is awakening. Its end is to know itself and to love itself and to awaken to what it is and to end its suffering. All those things. I don't know what it's like for you to hear that, but it's helpful for me even to hear that, because I'm often so entranced. And I'm like caught in the trance of other people's trances. We all reinforce each other's trances here. But what if every human being you met, when you bow in the kind of namaste moment, we don't do that in this culture though. Some people do it, and we do it in this class. People do it at the end of the class. It's something that's kind of catching on. What are we bowing to? We're bowing to each person's awakened being, destiny. We're bowing to that tree, which may not have really put out its fruit yet, but we're bowing to that stream of awareness and intelligent causation that will at some point come to know itself. That already, in some sense, knows itself. Even just giving a talk like this, and God knows why I'm giving a talk like this, because I didn't really start out intending to give a talk like this, but I'm giving a talk like this. And it's like sometimes I give a talk like this and something in you like starts to listen, and your mind doesn't really know what I'm talking about. Your mind, like, what is he talking about? I'm not sure I really know. But something in you does. Something in you recognizes that I'm talking about it. And it starts to listen. It's like, oh, he knows I'm real. He knows that there's this incredible freedom in what I am, which I might be in complete trance about and not see. I might, have been so entranced by all that conditioning when I came into the world as pure openness in a human body with a human personality, I have to add. That's part of the stream. I came into this world with complete openness, and I've gone into complete trance about who I am. And yet sometimes when you hear it talked about, something in you kind of goes, oh, wow. It may just be a feeling. Your intellect may just not know what to do with all of this, but it may just like be a feeling or smell, if I can use that metaphor, like you smell freedom. It's like, wow, that smells good. I might like that. and even though it might spook you, because it definitely spooked me, but really only for the first 15 years of my practice, it spooked me. This talk about it all just happening, that is happening on its own. There really isn't this controller called me doing all this. It kind of spooked me. I didn't like it. I didn't understand it. It made me feel a little stupid because I didn't understand it. But it also was scary. It was like, oh, it means I'm going to turn into a zombie, And so it took a long time till the light went on about this. So if you're sort of sitting in that place, I just want to say, yeah, okay, I get it. I get it, how weird this can sound. When you've been told your whole life that being a self is the most important thing of all, and for you to control yourself while you're at it. And make it all come out right. You know, you're supposed to make it all come out right. You're supposed to get it. You're supposed to, you know, be a success, be a something, be a good person, not a bad person. You're supposed to make it all, and it's all on your shoulders. Except when you're blaming other people. It feels like it's all on your shoulders. So, like, to suddenly like reconceive it. Hey, maybe this, what's going on here isn't what I thought. Maybe I can trust something besides this self character who's trying to control things and make it all work out right. Maybe I could trust that. Maybe that's like what's waiting to take over if I got out of the way. And maybe the burden of life would lessen and even disappear if I trusted that, if I awoke to that. Cool, you know? And, you know, all of the above, I have to say, for many, many years, I was all of the above. I was both the guy that was kind of like going, wow, I want that. And the guy going, oh, this sounds kind of weird and scary. And I had a lot of doubts. And, you know, meanwhile, all this sort of reactivity going on, you know what it is to be human. So it's all of the above. So anyway, I'm gonna wind it down here because I've been talking quite a while. Just let this percolate. Plant some seeds. You don't have to understand it all. You might just have felt something about the place I'm talking from. That might have stirred a feeling in you. That's probably the thing to trust, not your understanding of it. And just understand that what I'm pointing to is the core of what allows us to be at ease in life, to have this balance and non-reactivity. It's really the ripening of this kind of shedding of the view of it all being about a self. All right.